Monica Perez here today with a couple of guests who the kind of conversation I love to have. We come from different ideological perspectives, but we have the courage to face the facts and discuss what's happening, the right and wrong of it. It's really going to be a pleasure. And our guests, you've seen them both before, Jeremy Kuzmarov of Too Hot for the Mainstream on Substack. And of course, we've always known him from as the managing editor of covertactionmagazine.com. And now he does a podcast called Left on Left. Hello, Jeremy. Thanks for being here.
Great to be with you, as usual.
And of course, Matt Weinglass, who we've talked to. I've been on his show. He's been on my show. He does The Homeless Left, which is a lot of work, but he still has time to appear on RT.com and be a guest and fill-in co-host for Pasta and Fee. So he's he's all over the place. And a ubiquitous presence. And again, I just love that these guys come from the left, but we always are in pursuit of some basic moral ground, some common ground. And right now what's happening, I think, will provide us for a lot of material to try to get at the truth of what's going on. So obviously, there's some big topics here. What's happening in Iran, the No Kings protests, a lot more stuff. So anyway, hello, Matt. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely, Monica. Love these conversations. And what a time to be having one right now. So yeah, looking forward to this discussion.
Absolutely. So let's launch with, the things that it's too much to catch up on, but the stuff that Trump is saying about Iran, I don't know if people are listening live, but if they're listening even in a couple of days in the future, they might not know where we are right now, which is Israel started bombing Iran and Iran started popping off right back. And I just, you never know what's real or what's not real. But I just heard a quote from Trump who said something to the effect of, if you'd only negotiated 2 weeks ago, so many people wouldn't have to die. And that's the kind of thing that, it violates the tenets of a just war. It's punitive, and you're talking about people's lives. And I just can't help but wonder what the MAGA crowd is really going to think about this. So let's just start with that. Are you surprised, either of you surprised that Trump's taking this position, or did you see it coming the whole time?
If you want me to go
Yeah,
first.
go ahead.
Well, I think this is these plans have been in the works for years and years. General Wesley Clark, right after 9/11, he said that a general came in his office and that there was a plan for 7 countries regime change after 9/11, and Syria, of course, Iraq, Syria, Iran. And the key events in Syria, I think, set the groundwork for this. They were waiting. It took a lot longer than they had expected to get rid of the Assad government in Syria. But once that was achieved in December, they had, the opportunity now to go into Iran because, Syria was a key ally of the Iranian regime. And also October 7th, I think that was a false flag operation to set this up, to put the Israelis on the war path. That was a manufactured event. The Israeli border was among the most, heavily fortified borders. And, IDF soldiers said within I think 3 seconds, they would have normally apprehended any Hamas people if that was not set up. And I think, Israel, I disagree with those who believe that the Israeli lobby and, Israel controls American politics. I think actually America is using Israel to do its dirty work in the Middle East, and that's why they support the far right. And this is ruining Israel. It's ruined I think this is terrible for Jews. I'm Jewish. Number one, because it's destroyed the reputation of Israel unequivocally and Jewish people. And number two, Iran is fighting back. Israel's under attack and under siege. And a lot of Israelis have had to flee the country. It's not a safe country to live in because of that extremist government, but it's the United States. Going back decades, they used Israel. Going back to the 6-Day War, it was the Israelis who took out Nasser. The CIA had tried to assassinate Nasser and get rid of him because he was a socialist who was trying to unify Arab countries and restore control over their oil. and the U.S. wanted him to be removed, like Mossadegh in Iran. But they couldn't do it, so they used the Israelis. And that was around the time, the 60s, when the U.S. really started ramping up their military support to the Israelis. And the Israelis have continued. They've allowed themselves, and this was not the ideal of the original Zionist movement, to have the Israel be America's pit bull in the Middle East and do its dirty work. And it's corrupted irrevocably that country, and it will lead to its self-destruction. And that's what Noam Chomsky, they call him a self-hating Jew, but he was right all along. And in fact, Chomsky had been a Zionist in his youth. But he was disillusioned by the hatred of the Palestinians and racism toward Arabs he saw, but he was not against the idea of Zionism, in light of the persecution of Jewish people historically and in the Holocaust. And a lot of socialists and leftists had founded Israel. So anyway, to relate it back to Trump, I think it's beyond Trump. The American president is just a figurehead, and he says what they tell him to say, and this has been planned for decades, and the time is right because they got rid of the Assad government, and they're going to do it now, and they use Israel as the front man. But I mean, the U.S. is providing the intelligence, and now the U.S. may go in more fully soon.
Matt, do you agree? Or I'm sure that stimulated a lot of thoughts for you.
Well, I mean, let's start with the part we do agree with. Absolutely, this collusion between the U.S. and Israel, and how the people have been, manufactured into consent for war for, decade after decade. And Noam Chomsky absolutely is a great, go back to Noam Chomsky talking to us, telling us years ago how manufacturing public consent works. Looking closer and starting with your question about Trump personally, I believe, yes, absolutely, this has been planned forever, for years. He happens to be the guy, the face of the, in front of the camera, in this world of tweeting that we know, in Truth Social, that he's the guy putting out these shock tweets, very beyond disrespectful. Like you said, even to the point of, you're not actually allowed to suggest these type of things on a tweet. Maybe there's no law for it. Maybe we don't we have to update our laws about what is the president allowed to do.
Retributive killing is
exactly.
Nobody can accept that.
Does it really count? Is he off the job? Is he, you know what I mean? So there's these little loophole. Okay. But I think the point was hand selecting him to be this guy that sheep herded everybody into this, from the MAGA side and into this place where we're taking this deep state on. He's surviving these assassination tips. He's surviving all the judicial capture against him, the Banana Republic stuff. We see all that. It leads up to this moment. And I agree with Jeremy that this is the moment. And Syria is absolutely, you look at that moment in time that they were able to get Assad out, and now is the time to do this. So as I look closer, it's hard for me to fully grasp the idea that we are the perpetrators of this and using Israel as an arm of us in the Middle East. I used to think that, but as I look closer, it seems like it might be the other way around. Trump's behavior through these last few weeks really pulls a curtain back on who is the one informing who. So if it was Trump makes the call, Netanyahu changes his mind, that would line up with what Jeremy's saying. I think that there's something about Netanyahu and his ability to say, this is how it is, never mind what your president just told you, but this is how it is. And then what do you know? Right on cue, Trump changes his position. And I'm talking about whether he even knew about the Iran strike, which we knew he knew. That's not the point. The point is what he put out there into the Twitter sphere, into the Truth Social sphere. He put out, we had nothing to do with this. That was within 24 hours that was walked back, and everybody coordinated the new messaging because Netanyahu said so. And everything that's been done since then, and if we follow every single tweet, it's been about, Trump barks like a dog, and then Netanyahu brings him back. And it seems like that's what's going on here. But I guess at the end of the day, does it really matter who's making the call? The point is this massive collusion operation, tricking the American people, 7 wars in 5 years. We know Wesley Clark said that. One question I'll ask, I'll throw back to you guys. I believe when we look back at that tape of Wesley Clark talking to enemy governments, telling us about the top-down instructions, when I first heard that, I thought, here we go. This is the proof. He's the whistleblower of what was going on in that Pentagon, what was going on with that, Project at American New Century, what the role players, they were all in that room, Rumsfeld and Wolfowitz and Cheney. I never thought to ask who was giving that order. And when I look back at that moment, I don't think Wesley Clark ever asked who. He told us, I don't know who that top person was, but we were told to do this. Once you start putting those pieces together and you understand that the Mossad had been part of infiltrating the Pentagon way back then in 2021, 2022, you start to understand maybe there is a pecking order that we're not really allowed to question, and we just have to go along with it. And maybe it's been this way the entire time. Trump being so loud about stuff right now, breaking up his base, literally a civil war within the MAGA community is really that, like I said, the curtain pulling back moment where we can kind of see all of this playing out. And once you see it, you can't really unsee it.
A few things on that. With Netanyahu, and if you are going to go back to the Wesley Clark thing, it's not, I mean, Netanyahu wasn't firmly in control back then. And I mean, it's not him. So what's behind him? Do you think it's not? I mean, I know his father was like a founding Zionist, so it could be him, but do you think it's him? Okay,
so he plays different roles in whatever era we're talking about, but he absolutely would go to Congress. We have the tape. We have his 2001 saying, "Hey, we gotta go stop Iraq." They absolutely so he's the one that told us that first. We like to blame Cheney. We like to blame these suckers that were told these things and lying in front of the getting all the Congress on board for war with Iraq. Obviously illegal war. Everybody knows it was lies, but no, it was Netanyahu who was the one that said absolute fact. There's weapons of mass destruction. So that, and again, I'm not even saying he was the top guy. I'm saying he was very good.
I'm wondering who is that? Is it the Orthodox in Israel? Is it international bankers? Is it the King of England? Like, what do you think is the power that keeps him in power? Because he keeps losing elections and stuff. Like, and he's corrupt and on trial, and here he is running the world basically.
Yeah, no, we still need to understand the parts that haven't been revealed to us yet. Okay. How much of the Mossad, how much of the Pentagon was infiltrated by the Mossad? We just heard another colonel reveal this a week ago, saying no, the Mossad was working in every part of the Pentagon in 2001, 2002. Rumsfeld even told him, we're run by the Mossad. That's in the Pentagon. So we understand that there's darker operations going on and have been going on. I like to look at the doctrine from Israel. What is it that they're following? What is the thing that, so whoever is giving these orders, when we talk about October 7th, let's not forget, I 100% agree, this operation that was contrived, the Hannibal Directive, that's part of the doctrine that Netanyahu said, let's do it. Let's
you know what that is, Jeremy?
Yes.
The Hannibal Directive. Mm-hmm. It's where they can kill their own people for the purposes of whatever, like for whatever the ends justify the means. If there's more to it, I don't know.
And that part's very important. The part that how you justify the Hannibal Directive, it's not a secret. When you talk about it, they Netanyahu can justify it and say, oh no, it's for a greater good. We know how that formula works for the greater good. We get manipulated with that all the time, whether it's COVID, whatever it is. Stop Trump.
Yeah, that's a fundamental immorality, in my opinion. Like, it's fundamentally right. That's the whole reason why we have individual rights and all of that. That's not something that we embrace.
Right. So I think the Israeli people are, and let's get back to that part. Absolutely, this is horrible for them. The ones that have not signed up for this, they're there right now. They're being told by the Israeli ministry, they're being told you're not allowed to leave. That's being done right now. So you understand the psychology of everyone's expendable. To borrow a phrase from Lindsey Graham, down to the last Ukrainian, it looks like we're going down to the last Israeli. And I'll add on to that, down to the last American too. And that's why Netanyahu, when he goes on CNN, on ABC, and tells us a week ago, he told us America first. And he's talking to the MAGAs, by the way. He's talking to the MAGAs. America first really means America dead. Let's unpack that one, because I think there's a lot more going on there besides Iran is trying to kill your president.
Well, let me roll back to something earlier. And what something you said made me realize. So the Tea Party may have been spontaneous. I don't know. But it was eventually hijacked by the neocons. And it was just empty. Same thing with MAGA. And I think of this as Trump being the second termer. And if you remember Reagan or anybody else, like a lot of times the second term, like he really changed in the second term. What happens to him in the second term? So you can sacrifice, like this entire thing might have been solely to start a war with Iran. The whole I wouldn't surprise me in the slightest bit, to both of your points. And then you don't need that. I mean, you can spend a lot of time trying to justify it to the MAGA people to at least string it along for a while. But you could just sacrifice it at this point because the Senate is saying we want to give Trump unilateral power to declare World War III, basically. And that's what more do you need? But anyway, so Jeremy, what do you respond to, or what are you thinking about any of this?
Well, yeah, there are a lot of good points on the MAGA. You're right. I think this was like an AstroTurf creation, and Trump, time for the election, and to create a mass base for the Republican Party. When I mean, really, that's a party that their economic program, really benefits the elite 1%, and as far as their foreign policy has been, extremely hawkish. So, I mean, they don't have a platform that really appeals to the public at large, unless you're a 1%er or war profiteer or a big shot in the oil business. So, how do you gain any support? Well, you manufacture a Tea Party. You manufacture outrage at the Democratic Party in different ways. You make like it's this great crusade against the deep state. And I mean, I think it's all a dog and pony show. And I mean, even the assassinations against Trump look really suspicious, like that could have been all set up as part of the
I was watching The Sopranos the other day, and Tony had a Band-Aid on his ear. That was the exact same assassination attempt as Tony Soprano. I love when you find out when they got the idea. Anyway,
exactly.
sorry.
They get this from television.
Totally. Yeah.
It's all scripted.
Yeah.
Or worse, they know they're doing the plan, so they figure they'll slip it into the TV or film just as a little, hey guys, we're telling you on your screen what's gonna happen.
And that carves pathways. You look and you're like, oh, I've seen that before. That looks real. It was never real.
And so, I mean, it's just, and I mean, Trump is just a figurehead. I mean, any politician, they create a certain personality for him. That's going to endear certain aspects of the public. But I mean, really, the United States is an oligarchy, and I think you have to look at the groups that are donating, that fund these parties. As far as who's behind the policies, it's really the BlackRocks, the Lockheed Martin. I mean, these powerful entities are funding the elections, funding the candidates, and they manufacture an image. And I think the ruling oligarchy may like Trump because he's such a polarizing figure. He stirs strong emotions, and as part of a strategy really of divide and conquer, like with the No King, Trump becomes a good figure of hate on the left. And then they can plan these protests, no kings, and mobilize to get rid of him, as if that, would solve any problem in American politics when you have these deep-rooted structural problems. But that's convenient for the oligarchy to channel all the hatred against him and not the system that has corrupted both parties, and just to turn Americans against each other, because what they don't want is Americans coming together along class line, middle and working class Americans, regardless of party affiliation, coming together to challenge that oligarchy, and to try and establish a real democracy and a government that would actually develop economic policy that benefit the working and middle class, and that don't wage these endless wars that drain our treasury. But that's what they don't want. So they want to create partisan divisions. And who's better than Trump for doing that and creating, either you love, there's the element of hero worship in the MAGA side, and there's the Trump derangement syndrome on the left. And that's a perfect brew for the oligarchs who want to divide and conquer.
Well, let's talk about the No Kings thing. I live in LA. Matt, do you still live in LA? I can't remember.
Oh, I'm here, and I was right in the mix these last few weeks. Yeah.
So let's talk about that. It seems to me, I'm a libertarian. I believe in the right to work and travel. The way minimum wage, welfare, the way we control people's property and stuff, it seemed, and the way that we go into other countries and destroy them economically and militarily, we would have 7 billion people. And I mean, all of these policies are intentional in disrupting their societies, our societies. So I can't just go with my fundamental, right to work and travel. But I understand that. And if I were to say, okay, we have to enforce these laws, immigration, naturalization, whatever, the way they went in there doing it was absolutely not, in my opinion, an example of good government that, in a good faith effort, was attempting to make a lasting positive change for the country by enforcing the laws in a way that was predictable and sustainable. That's what you want from good government. And that is not what it was. It seemed deliberately provocative to me. But on the other hand, I look at it and I say, well, are the people who are out protesting, thousands of people just in Pasadena alone, which is where I live, where were they they're not civil libertarians, because where were they for COVID? And are they, the thing that gets them off the couch is undocumented people? Do they want the policy to change, or do they just want it not enforced? So those are my thoughts on it in a nutshell. But Matt, how do you come at the basic, what's the problem, what's the solution, and are these protesters right or wrong?
There's so much there, and I'm glad I'm glad we're having this discussion, because it's actually, when we went out to talk with the protesters, and I'm going to tell you guys how it shifted from the first weekend to the official No Kings national movement. They were completely different, but one led to the other. This was all I feel one big psyop, that this was not a random point on the calendar that just happened to happen. It was strategically planned this way. And Los Angeles, Southern California, is the best place to get this to happen, because you have a Latino community that's so strong. It's the majority here. So when you do these ICE raids right into the graduations and
I know.
elementary schools, I mean, these are real things that really screwed up some people and brought a lot of trauma. So everybody,
and they'll remember it forever, because they're in that really delicate. It's the most important thing. COVID had that element too.
Right. And I'm glad you brought up COVID, because this isn't a time to sit down and go, let's tell people how they're so hypocritical, why they weren't about this and now they're about. But the point is, this is how you get people to do things in this group think and not thinking for themselves. You trigger their emotions with an event, a manufactured event, and those emotions become very personal. This is a very personal attack in this community. That's how you got people in the street, because they saw their loved ones. Everybody here knows somebody who's undocumented.
The only people I know who were arrested, not my friends, but a friend of a friend, both of them were American citizens. So if you're going to make sure it's profoundly unjust on any argument, that'll get people pissed.
That will get people pissed, and rightfully so. They get in the street. So this was two weekends ago when the raid started on that Friday. And I predicted, and I think I was pretty right about this, that was going to be short term. This was not long lasting. If you look at the history of Trump's first presidency and every day up until this previous Friday, you can see that his pattern was always the deportations were always far, far less than Obama, far, far less than even Biden. Yeah. Even though Biden had the open border thing going, the deportations were much more. So people don't know that. We're talking about, if you look at the average of Obama's best year, he had and I say best in
millions,
way, but millions. You have 1,200 people being deported per day by Obama. Trump, every day since his second inauguration, has been 600. That's one half of that.
Yeah.
So
and
it was
not
only
systematic. That validates my sense that this is just not how it's done. That's not the effective method.
So, and this part's really hard to explain, especially to people that are emotionally going through trauma in real time. You can't have this conversation. You just have to support their needs. And by the way, let's be absolutely clear. We support the right to protest. Let's just be absolutely clear about that, because we had the backs of January 6 people. And it was really interesting that they fell for this, because they had it done to them. They know what it's like to have feds put into their rally, telling them, it was Ray Epps telling them January 5th, we're going into the Capitol. We're going into the Capitol. We know all that. They know all that. But for some reason, they fall for this. Look what happened in LA. Look at all those radical lefty, commie Antifas taking to the street and attacking the police No, that's not. This was psychological warfare. You had absolutely provocateurs in the crowd. I'm not just guessing this. I saw it. I was there. We went out to.
Wow. Yeah, you can tell when you're there.
We were in. Yeah. We saw the most crazy stuff, guys. I'm telling you, we were not in a good area. We had to get out. They were firebombing back and forth. These firebombs between the military and the people on the street. How did they get these weapons? Who gave it to them? We know how this worked. We saw George Floyd. We lived through George Floyd. So all of this was manufactured to get the right wing, and we saw this on Twitter like right after that weekend, after the Waymo cars went up in flames. Very strategic. That was not the people. That was not the locals doing that on their own. All of that was strategy. It was sending a message, and with that message, the right they bought it hook, line, and sinker. They started. Laura Loomer started tweeting out, "Let's punish those people." Look, you want to see it. You want to see Palantir. Well, guess what? Palantir's already here, guys. If you don't know Palantir, that's the operation. That's the
and now
AI
it's trading at
$150
a share when it opened at 15 and it was lagging for a long time. And I knew it was going to go up. I was like, I can't buy it though because it's evil. But yeah, it's like great publicity for them. And they really get people angry with this stuff. And then you get people on the right who are yelling at me like, "Oh, you want people to throw bombs at cops?" I'm like, I live here. Like, I don't want that stuff. But don't be an idiot and fall for this.
They're falling for it. They have a short-term memory. They don't remember the Patriot Act. They don't remember Homeland Security. They don't remember war on terror. Oh, don't worry, guys. That won't be used against the American people. Only the terrorists. It's like, so we all lived through that. Here we go again. This was by design. It was never about immigration. It was never about immigration. They used that issue against the people in LA. Again, real raids, real things happening. It was always going to be short-term. Right before No Kings, the following Saturday, right before No Kings, Trump goes on and says, "Hey, listen, guys, I've been talking to my hotel people and my, hospitality people and the farmers. They've been here 20 years. They haven't done anything. We're going to kind of back off." And he said that, and nobody heard him say that. Now, did he sign an actual thing to say, "Let's back off"? I don't know if he signed, but he said, we're going to back off. People that did see that go, "Yes, that means the protests are working." And I say to them, no, it was always going to be short term. That's what I predicted. The point was get everybody angry at each other. That's the drill. Just in time for what was the next weekend? Trump's birthday. It's time to get the Trump derangement syndrome people in the street. And I tell you guys, the demographic was totally different the following Saturday. You had elderly white people getting out there, and they were just like, all those people that said there was problems in the street, there wasn't. They lied. And I go, well, we were there. We were in the middle of fire. Like I
didn't understand that because I was wondering why I was getting two different reports. Okay, so I think there was, and of course, to have on Flag Day a military parade for your birthday is very fucking North Korean. Just like very king-like. But there are a few other that I absolutely see a connection. And Jeremy, I want to get your thoughts on this, that it was right before the Iran thing. So they definitely, somebody somewhere knew it was coming. And I've been noticing a pattern, numerous things, but two, I just remember off the top of my head that they've used in the immigration fight, which is the Alien Enemies Act, and also posse comitatus, which they're violating by putting Marines to put down a domestic. And I feel like that dovetails with the anti-Semitism legislation, which I feel has to be, it's so clearly a precaution against an unpopular war. And those alien enemies and the posse comitatus stuff, those can be used to put people in jail for, as you said, we want protests when people want to start protesting these wars. I mean, do you see that, Jeremy? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with your analysis. Yeah, I think both of you. I think we're seeing it's really a strategy of tension that was used in various locales during the Cold War years, and it's designed to create. Manufacture crises, and I guess you can call it deep events that get people to suspend rational judgment, because of the threat of violence in the streets, or just to create civil unrest, and that justifies the ramping up of police state measures. And it can justify, wars of aggression and all kinds of terrible things. So I think that's what we're seeing playing out, kind of on steroids. I mean, I think COVID was all part of that. It's designed to shock the people. The media covered, and that's why they have to malign dissenters. Using like military grade propaganda. They create this like emotional hatred for anybody who raises criticism, whether the COVID, whether these foreign policy. Yeah, so I think they're trying to manufacture that. Yeah, and with the anti-Semitism, that's part of the war propaganda, that any protesters or dissenters against U.S. policy in the Middle East are anti-Semitic somehow, and that's why they have to have these hearings, and they keep pushing that, even though it's not at all rational. I mean, there's nothing rational about it. But that's true. I mean, we've also lived through the Russian propaganda for at least a decade where they've done this, and anybody who questioned the U.S. support for Ukraine was a Putin apologist or something like that. And that's a technique they used throughout the Cold War as well. Anybody who criticized U.S. foreign policy was a communist or fellow traveler, and they faced ostracism. And they mastered human psychology. These people, they employ psychologists, and they've studied it, and it's historical a pattern they follow where they manipulate people psychologically, and they whip up people's emotions. And I think they came out of Nazi Germany. I mean, Joseph Goebbels was a master at whipping up people's emotions and causing the German people who supported Hitler, which wasn't necessarily the majority of Germans, but it was a strong enough minority that they could get away with doing what they're doing. And that's what we see here. And a percentage of the population is apathetic, just is involved in their own personal lives. So as long as they have enough supporters, it succeeds, and they get away with horrific crimes that we're discussing, whether it's the Iran war, whether it's the Ukraine war, whether it's the economic policies they're adopting that favor the 1%. Whereas the COVID atrocities and locking down the population and keeping kids out of schools, on down.
I actually think they did get way ahead of that specific thing, in that 10 years ago, you just wouldn't have had like hundreds of podcasts that can openly say, there's Jews under Manhattan drinking baby's blood. And I feel like they put all that out there. They made it kind of de rigueur so that they would have an excuse to bring these this legislation in, which isn't really so much, which incorporates criticism of the foreign policy of Israel as hate speech. I mean, it seems to me like that was part of a longer term plan. And I was looking at when Michelle Bachmann was saying that Iran would have nuclear weapons in 12 months, and that was in the 2012 presidential campaign. So I feel like this has been really on the front burner for a while. And I think they can make all these little fires smolder, and then at once it's a conflagration. Like with Syria, it was slow, and then it was just fast. And I'm thinking maybe with Iran that I don't know if either of you guys have a sense of whether it will be fast with Iran, but it seems like they are really hammering down to get regime change as fast as Syria. I think they got wind under their sails for that, and maybe put the Shah's son back in. But Matt, I think you had something to say about anything, whatever you're ready to respond to.
No. This is everything is timed. Everything's on purpose on the calendar. That if we were a fly on the wall, we'd see them kind of lining everything up on Trump's birthday, the whole March, and then we're going to have the Iran thing. Everything's on cue. But with that said, I think that we have to understand the people that have been captured. They're all kind of being captured in different ways, and some are further out of the capture than others. Some are able to have conversations right now where others aren't. And I'll say this: when we look at the MAGA community right now. We do see a massive divide. We see almost a civil war within it right now. And I think that's a great thing. We try to have these conversations with people here in LA when they're out in droves for No Kings, and they look over on the other side and they almost smirk at it. They go, look at them, all discombobulated. They're not aligned. We're aligned. And you say to them, well, hold on a second. Those are the type of conversations needed right now. People that went out and voted for Trump are holding him accountable right now. That's what they're doing. And that they should be the first ones. That's how politics is supposed to work. You're supposed to say, this isn't what I voted for. So we're seeing the people doing that right now, which is great. Like the Dave Smiths and the, Alex Jones and the, you have Matt Gaetz, you have Marjorie Taylor Greene. There's a lot of, now we can talk about their behavior and their thing that, how they conduct themselves in other ways. And that's fine. But on this particular thing, this is what we need. The left, you don't see any of that at all. We talk about the anti-war sentiment and saying we're not about this. When we showed up, rewind back to DC, the first Rage Against the War Machine protest. Who was out in the streets? It was libertarians, it was independents, it was Republicans. That's funny. No Democrats showed up to that. How weird. Nobody who voted for Biden in 2020 had any critique about him, not just for the proxy war in Ukraine. They didn't have any critique about him for anything, for starting the genocide after October 7th, for crushing the labor movement, for the COVID lockdowns that destroyed people's lives, mandating an experimental jab in people, not to mention taking away democracy from the people and not having a primary, and then pretending the guy had a stutter when it was clearly dementia. The list is so long, and none of them said anything. And so this is why right now, more than ever, we need, rather than allowing the Democrats to be like smirking over at the Republicans, they should take a lesson from them and say, this is what it looks like when you hold the people accountable that you vote for. And now more than ever, we need to figure out an alliance between a real populist movement of people that are truly anti-war on the left and people that are saying, we do not want to go to war with Iran. This is not America first. Come together and have a real message of change, and just, standing up for what's right, standing up for humanity. Can that happen? I don't know, but at least the conversation is happening on the right. I don't know what to do about the people on the left. They're still very bewildered. And I'll add that my last thought on this one is No King's March. When you go out there and tell those people, did you know this rally, this whole movement nationally was captured, was bought and paid for by the Walton heiress to Walmart? Did you know that? Isn't this is supposed to be your enemy? This is the person that you guys went out against for the labor movement. You guys know that. Why is she printing out signs that say "Stop the billionaires"? That it's almost like it's like salt on the wound. It's like a FU when you print signs like that and it's being funded by the billionaires. When you tell them that, they go, "Well, who cares? We're out here, right? That's great, right?" No, she's controlling the messaging, and that's why you don't see anti-war people in the street. Last weekend, all you saw was "Stop King Trump, Stop King Trump." You weren't allowed to go out there with anything else. They didn't let you. All the organizations that had anti-war messages, anti-NATO messages, anti-Zionism messages, anti-imperialism messages, which is the root of an immigration problem. By the way, we have to look at that. They weren't allowed to come out with their signage. That's how you control. You buy a movement, you control it from the top down. So I don't know what to say to them next, but at least the people on the right are willing to have a conversation about being bait and switched on, because that's what this administration has been doing to them this last 3, 4, 5, 6 months.
I was looking into the Coalition for a Humane Immigration Policy, I think is the name of the thing, and the national organized non what is it? Some labor policy. It's like the labor policy of the people who are just on the street looking for jobs who aren't union guys, and they were all found their roots in the Ford Foundation. And one of their aspirations, one of their mission statements is to create other organizations that have the same goals so that it looks like there's lots and lots of them. So it even back then started there. And maybe that dovetails into where you say a lot of this immigration stuff comes from. And yes, and it's very different, the Israeli immigration policy and the U.S. immigration policy. And, but that gets into that high level conspiracy stuff that like just it feels very hopeless. If there's a level of if it's really that's hateful to like intentionally destroy another country. And I can't, it bums me out to think that. I mean, I think that's what you're saying, right? It's an intentional destruction of the country.
Well, that's what American imperialism is. It's worldwide domination, destroying all these other countries. That's the point. That's
our immigration policy, like to allow us to have immigrants that undermine local cultures, national culture, just because they don't understand the principles that make this country great. It's like it's a very inverted immigration policy, I think.
Oh,
and
yeah, you're right.
It's behind that. Yeah,
that's absolutely on purpose. I mean, just take the 199 Venezuelan call it the gang members that Trump ends up shipping to El Salvador super prison. That whole thing again. That's I hate using the word theater, but like, it was all done purposely. The CIA engaged with Maduro in Venezuela and took them specifically those ones out of Venezuela, threw them into California or wherever they were displaced to. And just so there would be this problem, just so there would be this, aha, we gotcha. And you create, again, more fear, more divide, more, oh my God, our crime rate's up, or what's going to happen? We have to do something about this. So we create the problem right on our homeland. Absolutely, we do that.
And don't forget
over and over. Yeah.
The money. I found one reference. It's very hard to find. I wonder if I could even get it again in Trump's first term where he was withholding aid to the triangle countries. I don't know if it was Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras maybe. And the requirement was that they build facilities there. And my first thought is this guy's, a real estate developer, and there's a lot of that. Don't forget there's just a lot of like pure venality. Anyway, Jeremy, what do you think about all this? I don't know if you have thoughts on what we're saying. I'm happy to ask you specific questions, but I'm sure you've had some reactions to what we've been saying.
Okay, well, yeah, you could maybe ask me specific things. On the immigration issue, yeah, it's true. As a historian, the anti-imperialist league, because I think we need a new anti-imperialist league, and that could bring together conservatives, liberal, leftists who are against imperialism and believe that the United States was founded as a republic, not an empire. There was an anti-imperialist league, and I teach American history at a community college, and we cover the U.S. rise to empire in the late 19th century, the colonization of the Philippines, and we address the anti-imperialist league, which had a lot of influence. There was a real debate at that time about empire, and there were people in Congress speaking out against it. There were prominent figures of that era like Mark Twain, like William James, who were in the anti-imperialist league. He was the father of modern psychology. The president of Harvard, Charles Eliot, was part of the anti-imperialist league, and they were against the war in the Philippines, but they made a central argument that America was founded as a republic, not an empire. But they also warned, a lot of people in the anti-imperialist league warned that imperialism would fuel mass immigration on a level that couldn't be controlled. So, that's an argument people can make to appeal to a certain base who are very strong in their viewpoint regarding immigration. So I think, we need a new anti-imperialist league. And I agree with Matt that we need to draw as wide a coalition as possible. I mean, politics makes for strange bedfellows sometimes, and you don't always have to agree on every issue with people to join with them on these vital issues that we're discussing, especially against these senseless wars, against imperialistic foreign policy. And you can make that argument about how detrimental it is to the United States. And that was also an argument that was made by the Anti-Imperialist League, that it would corrupt American democracy. And obviously that was prescient. We've seen that play out over the last 100 years.
I was unaware that these things were predicted, and I've observed those things. Of course, I'm like, it looks to me like blowing up other countries creates a real immigration problem for us,
Yeah.
and it does seem like it undermines any kind of democratic support for our founding principles. This is what
Yeah.
happens, but I'm just observing it, and I didn't realize
Yeah,
that
and
that
if you
was
go
part of the
back in the
anti-war.
writing, because we studied that in my course, and that there's an essay we use that has a section on the Anti-Imperialist League, and I did an article about the Anti-Imperialist League. So I read a few books written by historians that delved into their writings, and then found some of their writings. Some are accessible online, and those are the kind of thing they were warning about. That it would ruin American democracy. You can't have an empire and a democracy, and that the deceitful way in which those wars are carried out would come back home, and the politician would use the same deceit universally. And that's what we've seen. And people train. Even look at our police force, and there are studies like Alfred McCoy did a brilliant book called Policing America's Empire, the U.S., the Philippines, and the Rise of the Surveillance State. And he shows how agents of the U.S. empire in the Philippines, including the father of American military intelligence, Ralph Van Diemen, adopted all these courses in the
Sorry,
Philippines
that's Arturo.
to undermine the nationalistic movement in the Philippines and messianic peasant rebels. And they developed a mass surveillance system and blacklists, and they used this repressive technology. And then Van Diemen came home and developed blacklists on subversives in the United States, leftist groups like Industrial Workers of the World, the Socialists, anyone on the left, or civil rights groups. And that's exactly what the anti-imperialists warned about. And I mean, yeah, you can look at our police state today. I mean, the military hands over a lot of its equipment to police forces, and our police forces are more like occupying armies than democratic police as they were envisioned. The police that serve the public. So that's just one way our democracy is totally corrupted today, and these lying politicians on down. So, and I think that resonates. Anti-imperialist movement has to develop a message that will resonate with a lot of the public who may, and given our education system and media, they may not understand. People aren't always up to date on the intricacies of various countries the U.S. invades. But if you talk about the corrupting influence on American life, they understand that. So yeah, I think you need to be strategic, like what Matt is saying. And yeah, the Rage Against the War Machine was a good start at trying to bring different groups together. But unfortunately, the left was so Russophobic. I think the propaganda for the Russia stuff, they really targeted the left media and the liberal left. You just can't break through them on that. So they're the
Yeah,
strongest barrier. I think
obviously.
middle Americans could be reached. But I think, and one other point I'll make is that these campus protests, I know it's good that the students are angry about the Israel genocide, but they've got to be more strategic. I mean, they're kind of hopeless as far as I mean, building a social movement, you have to be strategic, and you want to reach a wide, you want to be able to appeal to middle America, and waving the Palestinian flag and chanting, these slogans from river to the sea. It's going to alienate certain elements of middle America, even if they may have a right cause. You have to be strategic about it. So I think the message of the anti-war and anti-imperialist movement to build a broad movement, it should focus on the corrupting effects on U.S. democracy, on the immigration issue, and just the humanitarian issue in general. But get away from supporting, because there are militant groups that you don't want to identify with Hamas. Uh, and that's going to, some people may think, oh, if you support Palestine, you support Hamas. Now, we know that not to be true, but again, you have to be strategic in building a social movement. So just to feed off what Matt's saying, I'd like to see the same thing develop.
I will say that's interesting that you should say that, because if you want to appeal to the right, you would talk about property rights, about not killing, about not stealing. We can all get behind that. That is what this is about, actually, as far, from my perspective. Yeah, humanitarianism. But to me, if you're not killing and stealing, people don't need the humanitarian aid. But also, Matt obviously knows about this anti-imperialist stuff, and I didn't. And that is a function of something I've noticed before, which is, whenever you start reading something, whenever I've read, I used to would just put it down, because anything that is overtly anti-imperialistic always is coupled, in my experience, with socialism. And I don't like socialism, but I don't like imperialism. And I noticed it really came to the fore on October 8th. I mean, right away. As soon I went to see, okay, is this person full of shit? Is this person full of shit? Same thing after the assassination attempt. I was like, it was my litmus test to see what people were saying, because that was a false flag on October 7th. And if you didn't know it was ridiculous, then you got a reason for not saying that. So one person I won't name, because, oh my goodness gracious, do I get fucking completely flooded on Twitter if I criticize this person overtly. And then I got to deal with that all night, which I'm not doing. So is that so anybody who was against who was saying that the October 7th, the retaliation or whatever, bombing Palestine, they were against it because they were anti-colonialist. They were that. So all of a sudden, anybody who didn't like that was an anti-colonialist, woke-tard Marxist. And then all of a sudden, you're demonizing the protesters based on this socialist kind of ideology, which is not relevant. Our domestic economic policies our foundational documents do not allow for imperialism. And Alfred McCoy, I think, was the person who said the CIA would read his books, because I have a couple of books here on the politics of heroin in Southeast Asia and other things he's written on the topic. He said some of the stuff they took out, and they said, you can say it, but you can't say it in this book. You need to keep stuff in their silos. And I think that's one of the reasons we can't, we don't unite shoulder to shoulder. But yeah, so this was not news to Matt.
Well, I would say this, look, from this point, when we have these conversations, when we do the homeless left, our starting point is non-tribal. So let's get out of our tribes, and then these conversations can resonate more with people, because we have these things we kind of fixate on, especially when we're in uncharted territory or we're in a new place that we're not comfortable in. We tend to grip onto those things that make us who we are, because we're defined by, right? Yeah. So even you said something, and I'm gonna get a little personal, because I think it's important. We talk about, well, there's a trigger there, right? So you're saying I don't like socialism. There's a trigger there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that comes probably, if I go too far, please stop me. But I'm saying there's an element of that might come from how we are conditioned in the capitalist system we live in the America.
I've thought of that. I was like, yeah. I'm an overachiever. I do great on SATs. So what do I think? I think the system's fair, like that's, and I try to think about other people. If you were really, somebody with leprosy and missing a couple of limbs in India, which I know people, like I have relationships with priests and stuff there, and in Peru and stuff, like, where's your, what, like, social justice is one of those words, just bleh. I don't want to talk about that, but what is justice there? You simply have to have either a really compelling sense of morality that's universal enough to make sure all those people are taken care of. But I can see how that's not always reliable. So I know it's my point of view.
Right. But we can expand our realm of thinking when we take those walls down, especially when we find ourselves in this world. We've all lived through this COVID psyop. We've all lived through, these proxy wars popping up, just this revving up this empire as much as we can, and as much part of the world as we can. We've lived through this. This is like it's just like multiplying in real time in a very rapid way. We have to stop thinking that when capitalism fails, it's the fault of, we blame socialism. When socialism fails, we also blame socialism. The point is, we've been kind of captured with this idea that this thing that we're trying to preserve, right? This American exceptionalism, the American dream, we're number one, this thing we're trying to preserve. And again, obviously MAGA's, that's part of the whole Make America Great Again, this thing we're trying to hold on to, grip with all our might. it never was real from the beginning.
Well, even to the extent there was entrepreneurship, it's been co-op. It's financial capitalism now, and nobody thinks that's fair.
But the system itself can't exist without imperialism. It can't exist without the war policy and the rouge of it's a fake democracy. That's the only way it can work. If we behaved in an honest way, there would be other ways also popping up that also worked and also made sense, and you wouldn't have to destroy them. And we always say this to be if
yes, they destroy it.
We destroy it. It doesn't destroy itself.
But even mom and pop entrepreneurship must be destroyed. That's part of what COVID. So I would used to call that capitalism, but now I will, in the definitions it matters. But what you're talking about, which is capital, capital, it has to crush the mom and pop entrepreneur just as much as it has to crush a communist, agricultural movement in South America.
It has to crush everything. When we learned this in the game of Monopoly growing up, and we were like, how does Monopoly win? When one person wins and everybody else loses, like everything. We take everything. It's right in our philosophy from the beginning, from birth. But the point is, rather than trying to say, get out of this tribe, come into this tribe. So that would be doing the same thing. What I'm saying is we got to get all the tribes out of the way altogether and stop labeling ourselves, because the labels is what holds us up. The labels is exactly the problem with why we can't have a real anti-war movement. Can we have an anti-war movement? This is a question for people. Can we have an anti-war movement that isn't about labeling us something in order to be present for it? And like in the medical freedom movement, this is a great example, because we align with so many self-described right-wing populists that came into that movement, but they had to keep there were some values that they did not want to get rid of, because this is very important. We hold on to these things, but we understand that our system got captured, the society shut down, people are being forced to do something they don't want to do, free speech is being taken from us. So they understood those were fundamentals that were being taken away from us. But they stayed in this little camp, and we weren't able to expand beyond that tribe. And same with people outside of that. They didn't want to go in there, because what did they start doing? They started calling everybody anti-vaxxers. So these are the things, you get called these names, whether you embrace it or not. It's meant as a derogatory term to keep people from not taking what you have to say seriously. If we get rid of all the terminologies, whether it's anti-vaxxer, whether it's anti-Semite, whether it's socialist, communist, whether it's whatever it is, can we take those labels off and start saying we actually agree on a lot of stuff similarly? We all want.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
Want these things, right?
The more tribal it appears, I think the closer we are. The policies are converging. We are polarizing, but the policies are converging. I mean, every country in the world is the vaccine. Anyway, Jeremy, what do you think?
Well, I would make 2 points, brief ones. Number one, I mean, I agree with what Matt's saying, and that's part of my point about the strategy of tension. I think that's a deliberate strategy of the oligarchy to create this tribalism and division, and to prevent people from unifying along class lines for a broad movement for real democracy and against imperialism, which does not benefit the American public, and nor, of course, foreign countries that are destroyed, as Matt pointed out. And my second point is, this toxic labeling. I think we need a movement against that. Whatever your position is, that we don't want to use those labels, that we want to have intellectual debates, and we should try and push back, and maybe a group can form to push back against these and what they are McCarthyites. And if there's any label that's done, we should label those people who do that, because it's a dirty trick. And it harks
and
back.
They're all doing that now, like Chuck Schumer. That there's like an anti-Chinese investment committee, like that's been around for years, and they're talking about like anti-American activity stuff. It's like very
it's government officials, it's the media, it's academia, and it leads to blacklisting and cruel treatment of people. And it's reminiscent of the Salem witch trials, as well, the McCarthy era. And it's an ugly feature of American political culture. And I think most people do innately understand that they're often intimidated. So I think we need a movement just against that we want real civil discourse, And whether we agree or disagree with certain controversial figures, but we agree that we want to have a real debate. We don't want to just call him an anti-vaxxer. We want to hear his point of view, and if he's wrong about something, we have the evidence, then we present that. We just have a civil debate about Russia. So I would like to join a group that is against that labeling and see that take off, and that some of these people who perpetrate that they're the ones who start to feel the heat and they back off.
Well, you've always definitely, I feel like both of you been leading the charge on that, because we can all get along, and I'm a fucking anarchist. So on the other side. So, but that leads me to my last question topic briefly. Just want to know, starting with you, Jeremy, my opinion of what's happening, like with Harvard, for example, is I feel like what Trump's doing to them is giving them an excuse to have censorship on campus. I don't think they don't want to do it. It's been, academia has had these agendas, and I'm sure they're not like the G7 just came out with a statement today. That's Canada, France, Germany, the US, UK, Italy, and Japan, that Israel has a right to defend itself and therefore can bomb Iran. I mean, these are captured institutions. So what do you make of the conflict between Trump and Harvard? Do you think it's genuine? Do you think it's set up for something? What do you think the impact's going to be? And I want to know, Matt thinks also. But you've been in academia, Jeremy.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know what agenda may be behind the scenes or if it's set up, but I mean, I know it's a phony debate. Yeah, because I think the liberal side is, sees, Harvard is standing up to the big bad Trump, and it's Trump, is trying to promote this censorship. But I mean, these universities have been promoting censorship for decades. And I recently did an article about Harvard and their appointment of Sullivan to their faculty, and how he was a long line of warmonger on their faculty, and how they don't have anybody in an anti-war position on their faculty. Certainly not in the Harvard Kennedy School, not in the Foreign Policy School, not in the History Department. I know their historian of foreign relations. They have gatekeepers. He pushes this idea that Oswald was the lone assassin, and anybody who questioned that is a conspiracy theorist. That's Frederick Logeval, who's a history professor at Harvard. So they have these kind of people on their faculty, and they blacklist people with genuine anti-war views. They can't get on the faculty.
Do you know Jake's title?
Sorry, who?
Do you know Jake Sullivan's title? It's Jake Sullivan you're talking about,
yeah,
right?
He's the Henry Kissinger. What is it?
He's the Kissinger professor of the practice of statecraft and world order at the Harvard Kennedy School. Like they said in your face.
Yeah, these are the people they're hiring. And the place is swarming with CIA. The Harvard Kennedy School, a lot of their faculty have worked for the CIA, and they push a narrative. I didn't study there, but I did study at the Tufts Fletcher School, and we had some interchange with the Harvard Kennedy School, and I know what kind of history they teach.
Yeah, Jeremy lost his career as a professor basically for just saying real stuff about bad stuff about the CIA, I guess.
Yeah, they don't want courses. It's very rare. And Alfred McCoy teaches a course at the University of Wisconsin, but I was teaching a course and I collaborated with him. I looked at his syllabus and adopted some aspects of his course. But where I was teaching, which I'm actually not allowed to say on air because of a
wow. All right, sorry, I don't want to get you.
I didn't fly there, and I taught at some other schools, and I got mistreated. Whether it was specifically because I taught on the CIA or some other reason.
I was just inferring. You never told me any of that. Just seemed
but I mean, in general, they don't allow. And McCoy, what I've noticed is that there were some from that generation. McCoy was from the Vietnam era, where there was large critical body of thinking that developed about the Vietnam War, and it led to broader scrutiny about U.S. foreign policy by a lot of scholars. But then there was this pushback. Sam Huntington of Harvard, they wrote this report the Trilateral Commission, the crisis of democracy, and they said we have too much democracy and too much critical thinking. And I think they began purging and pushing back against the liberal tendency that were developing in the academy out of the 60s. And flash forward 30 years, you can't get a job anymore if you're teaching courses on the CIA or you want to develop a critical. Because there was the Wisconsin school based on this guy William Appleman Williams that promoted critical insights into U.S. foreign policy and developed a political economy approach where they looked at U.S. corporations and how they drove a lot of foreign policy, nefarious foreign policy interventions. But there had been this conservative pushback and takeover. The Schaefer, the Society of Historians of American Foreign Relations, it got taken over by these conservatives and militarists. By conservative, I mean like pro-U.S. foreign policy. Probably a lot of them identify a Democratic Party, but we see how that party is the most hawkish party. And they brought David Petraeus, the CIA director, to a Schaefer conference. And a friend of mine is going to the conference this year, and we were discussing how that there's new scholarship where they're distorting the history of the Vietnam War, and they're claiming it was Hanoi propaganda that the U.S. troops committed atrocities, and Ngo Dinh Diem, the U.S. client, was a good guy, and Ho Chi Minh was a Soviet puppet. That kind of analysis is taking over the Vietnam War studies field. And he said that he went to the conference this year, and he said that whole organization was taken over by nationalists and militarists. So this critical analysis that you once had, the Wisconsin school has been eviscerated. Young people can't get jobs who promote, they teach courses where they present critical analysis of U.S. foreign policy. If they've done a dissertation that really critically scrutinizes U.S. foreign policy, they're not getting any jobs. So their young faculty are intimidated. And that's what's been going on. And Harvard, I did an article, they have this misinformation review, and they have a new major, I found, misinformation studies. And it's just like,
my daughter was applying to a high school and they had a club, a fucking disinformation
and it's all
club
about
or whatever.
and I did an article, and I was like, well, why don't they study how Obama promoted disinformation about Libya and the Viagra fueling an illegal war? You can study that. That was government misinformation. Or what about the misinformation about Russiagate and Ukraine? But no, it's all about how Russia promotes misinformation and conspiracy theories. And Seth Rich, that's a conspiracy theory. And anybody who questions what happened to Seth Rich, and they're trying to like psychoanalyze people who question
yes.
the Seth Rich killing when it's obvious the official story didn't even make sense. Yeah. So this is what's become of Harvard and academia, and it's a disgrace. And it's not even what I had when I was a student. I did have some good professors. I didn't have that propaganda. So academia has gone to the gutter. So to make and that's sad, because that's the lifeblood of democracy, along with the media. When you lose your university, a free exchange in the university, and ability for critical thinking and alternative visions of society in universities, in the media, that's what's fascism. It's not just Trump's election; it's these broader phenomenon, and it starts with that report, The Crisis in Democracy, and it was authored of the Trilateral Commission, the elite Rockefeller funded agency, and it was a Harvard professor who was the lead author, and Sam Huntington, who was a Vietnam warmonger who served the Carter administration. And to their credit, Harvard students in the 60s protested at his office and called him a war criminal. And that's what students should be doing. I'm glad they're doing that for Israel Gaza, but there are a lot of war criminals. Stanford has a war criminal, Michael McFaul, who's a key figure in the Ukraine war. There should be protests at his office, and people like.
I think Stanford is pretty clearly like an arm of the defense industry, like MIT.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, but Matt,
At
I'd like.
MIT, I did an article. They were running covert operation into Ukraine using MIT
Oh,
students, and they bragged about it on their website. The MIT students developed this complex computer system for getting weapons to the front line in Ukraine, and that was in the MIT like PR newsletter. And this is going on in our
those are
university
acts of war.
with fronts for intelligence operations,
I mean, that's
and
not even a proxy thing. Like, I think to
yeah,
aid someone in a hot war
yeah, and
is an
that's
alliance.
education. That
Yeah, that's not
so this is
education.
very disturbing, and so this is like a dog and pony show. I mean, I don't agree with Trump and his tactics, but Harvard isn't a good guy
Yeah.
either, sadly.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. There are no heroes in the story.
No.
So, Matt, I'll give you the last word on that or anything else, and then you have a very long time. I'm sure you both do. So, tell me anything you want to tell me, Matt, and then tell people where they can find you.
I mean, well, first of all, Jeremy, all that peddling, all that CIA, anti-CIA propaganda that you're doing. I mean, misinformation, man. I mean, you got to be in line with the state
Yeah.
narrative. So that's what happened there. But yeah, but the thing, yeah, explaining that, and I appreciate you explaining that the full capture of academia, and that would really, when you look at what Trump. And the back and forth, a lot of that was theater, but that leaves the students. These are the innocent ones, right? The innocent bystanders are caught in the middle of this fake a performance art piece that the general public thinks that, oh, the colleges have gone too far. It's always they've gone too far left, right? That woke is so far left and DEI is left. No, all of that is top down. That's all top down. That's why it makes sense the CIA is controlling all these institutions. We don't have the left is gone. That's why we call ourselves the homeless left. But we are non-tribal for sure. But there's no left. There's just these theater pieces that are played out. But to go back to the students, the kids, the people, the innocent people that are going off of their impulse to protect humanity. That's why they're in the streets. That's why they're carrying the Palestinian flag and they're saying Free Palestine. And now they're being told that Free Palestine is an act of it's a crime. It's saying you're inflicting a harm on Jewish people. It's a hate crime to even have a sign right now. So there's a lot of these operations going on, not just the battle with the colleges and all that with Trump. And they're actually making these other incidents known very well, very clearly, like the two the Israeli embassy murders that happened, that they were saying, oh, it was a hate crime, but yet the guy that was killed was Christian, and the guy that stood by to be handcuffed conveniently says to the cameras, Free Palestine. So we know these are all psyop operations to make it even harder for the students to do their messaging and get their movement aligned and fight back beyond all of this. It's very, very difficult. So like on one hand, yeah, Jeremy, you're right. Like they have to do better with their messaging, but I have to say their messaging right now is kicking the crap out of some of these other ones. We mentioned the No Kings earlier. I mean, they don't even know what they're out there for. They don't know what they never even had any demands. They just wanted to stick it to Trump. There's no demands because tomorrow they wake up and you say to them, okay, what was accomplished? What's next? They don't know. They can't answer those questions. At least the students and the people in the street for Palestine, they have demands and they're very clear. And I have to give them props for that. The divesting in the colleges, that's where we started this. That's why you have this problem with the colleges, because they're stuck at this place where they are also guilty of fueling Israel's war crimes. So the students are saying very clearly, divest in Israel. That's a very clear mark on what they are presenting as far as their demands. So that's good. Can it be a tighter movement? Sure, but they are up against a massive fight. And but if anyone can figure it out more than the older people that have no clue what's going on, like I said, in LA, we had these older white people showing up for the No Kings, and they have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
I think the kids, these are the ones that got into politics, very recently. They don't know about the Obama days and all the stuff we went through with Bush Cheney and the Halliburton money making machine there and all the Patriot Act. They don't know about all that, but they're living through this time now, and they know this is wrong, and they know going to war with Iran is wrong. And maybe that's the key. Maybe that's the key demographic for us to look at and try and get rid of these labels and these groups and just say, we're just for humanity. We know this is wrong. We know policing the world and taking out people and putting in these regime change wars. We know this is wrong. And we know that the entire Congress is captured. by Israel, and we don't like. That's not a democracy. That's not what we're learning in school. Is not what we're seeing with our own eyes, and we've had enough. So that would be where I think we should focus our energy on the Gen Zs, on the millennials, on the ones coming up from there that are younger than that, and just move forward with that. I think that's what we have on our side, is the younger people figuring this out before any of the older people will. I'm not saying they're hopeless. I'm just saying let's focus our energy on the youth with the energy, and let's try.
Yeah, it would be good to do that, because a lot of times these things get ginned up with a pre-arranged plan to hijack it or redirect it.
Yeah.
But even if it is something that is meant to go in a certain direction, that's why there's 24/7 propaganda, because they cannot fully control people's minds and hearts, and and the truth is very appealing. So even like with that G7 statement, Israel has a right to defend itself, they have to always couch it in the terms of self-defense, because people have that natural innate moral imperative that they understand it. So it's an uphill battle to get them to not see that. So it should be possible, but you have to put the effort in like they do.
Yeah, and keep having these conversations like this. This is what it's about. We have to talk to everybody, people that maybe didn't want to talk before because they were in their little camps with the election back in November.
I know that pisses me off. Like, just whatever, vote for Trump. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Anyway, Kat.
Well, a lot of them did. Now let's be clear. A lot of people voted for Trump because they were punishing the Democratic Party for not getting their back and doing everything wrong.
Yeah, I mean,
and
that's
and
too.
I think this is a good reason. I didn't vote for Trump, but this is a good reason to. I mean, this is obviously now looking back, whatever, but we didn't know at the time. But just out of principle, you're saying, I'm going to punish this party because they did all these horrible things against the people. We'll give this guy a chance. If he also screws us, then we're done with him. So it's hard to argue that one. But here we are now. We don't, let's move forward. I think there's a real opportunity, not just with the youth movement in the streets for Palestine. The MAGA is, again, they're having that little civil war within the MAGAs. We can take advantage of this time right now where people are being vocal about this isn't what we voted for. We need to overhaul the entire system. Maybe we can with bringing these people together without labels, without tribes, but a real populist movement from the ground up.
That would be awesome. So why don't you tell Matt people where they can find you? And it sounds like you're out there, and you are too, Jeremy. So tell people how they can keep up on what you're doing and continue in the right direction.
So the show's called The Homeless Left. We're on Tuesdays and Thursdays on Rumble. We had to start a new YouTube channel because they told us our conversations were too dangerous for the community. So they terminated The Homeless Left on YouTube, but we have a new channel. Yeah. It's called THL Present. It's on YouTube. The main one's on Rumble. We've been on there a few years. We have tons of guests come on. You've been on, Monica. It's been great. Just having these right. Good times. Just doing what we're doing here and having real honest discourse, non-tribal approach to news, non-tribal approach to day-to-day life, and just trying to bring people together under that platform of critical thinking, pro-critical thinking, no to tribal goggles. Take those tribal goggles off and let's start. Let's align. That's what we do. So that's Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then you can follow me on Twitter, Matt Weinglass, on Twitter.
Yes, excellent. Thank you. All right, how about you, Jeremy?
Oh, and that's great. I think your approach is great, Matt. That's terrific what you're doing. And I could be, Covert Action Magazine. I write a lot of articles, so check us out. Those look at the CIA, and some are historical articles on the CIA. And I also have a Substack, Too Hot for the Mainstream, and a podcast that is on WBI radio as well called Left on Left.
Awesome. And can you listen? Do you post the Left on Left on iTunes or on your Substack?
We have a Substack, Left on Left.
Oh, cool.
And I also posted on my Substack, Too Hot for the Mainstream.
Awesome. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I think we have to do this a little more often because it just, there isn't enough time to pull on every thread. So we'll do it again. Thank you so much for coming. If you wouldn't mind hanging on so I can upload your stuff, it'll happen automatically. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is Monica Perez.